Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some very spicy battles in the Open Master League, featuring my brand new level 50 shiny Obstagoon. I asked on stream the other day what spice picks you guys would like to see in the Open Master League, and the winner of that poll was Obstagoon. So I did power it all the way up to level 50, and even though it doesn't even make 3000 CP, we're going to be trying it out in Masters. I paired it up with a Ho-Oh and a Zacian, and let's see if we can get some wins. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and check out Obstagoon in the Master League. Hopping to the first match, picking up a pretty decent lead, Obstagoon into Dialga. My opponent is going to be safe switching into Therian Landorus, and this is very bad. My team does not have a reliable check to Therian Landorus, so things definitely not looking good. I send in Zacian, but without play rough, Zacian cannot reliably keep switch from Therian Landorus. I'm able to make it to the back-to-back close combats here, but all they have to do is shield one. My defense after the second is now going to be lowered by 4 stages, and from here, they can very comfortably keep switch advantage. So I kind of have to just let the Zacian go and hope that with an energy lead, my Ho-Oh can do very well versus the rest of their team. I'm going to send in Ho-Oh. They make it to the Stone Edge. I will be committing the shield, and then I'm going to look to incinerate down. Ho-Oh with energy is quite deadly. Opponent does not want to give me the energy lead. They pivot back into Dialga, but this means I get the alignment that I'm looking for. I get to align Obstagoon onto Dialga. Obstagoon farming up here, going for another cross chop. This is not going to be lethal, but it will be getting the Dialga low. Obstagoon gets the Dialga low. Dialga is going to be firing off a charge move here. They are going to be firing off the Iron Head. That gets me low, and now we end up in a standoff where neither one of us wants to KO each other. I want him to KO me so I get the farm with my Ho-Oh, and he wants to farm with his back Pokemon. I finally am going to farm down in the back. They have their own Ho-Oh, and I'm going to send in my own. But since we waited, my switch clock was up, so I'm able to save my Obstagoon for a potential catch later. I fire off the Sacred Fire, and I get the debuff. That is so nice. I tank whatever they throw here, so I'm going to let this through. They go for the Sacred Fire, and they do not debuff me. That is quite nice. I'm going for another Sacred Fire here. Sacred Fire does get shielded. I continue to farm. I just have to watch for a potential catch here. So I will be committing the shield. It's a Sacred Fire. Opponent sends in the Landorus. Landorus cannot make the Stone Edge, and that is a good game. Picking up a Nightmare lead in the next match, Obstagoon into Therian Landorus. I'm going to save switch into Zacian. My opponent staying in this matchup, which is probably the best thing that I could hope for here, because this team is just absurdly weak to Landorus, and so far, Landorus is all that we're seeing. I'm going to farm up to the back-to-back close combats here, firing off the first. Close combat is going to get the shield, and I'm going for close combat number 2. My opponent knows they can live this, so they will let that through, but now I get some valuable chip damage onto my opponent's Landorus. They've overfarmed a ton of energy. I'm going to let this through. They're going to fire off the Stone Edge. They don't want to debuff themselves. I'm going to send in Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh farming up. My opponent is now going to pivot into Dialga. I'm going to bank some energy on Ho-Oh and send in the Obstagoon. Obstagoon firing off the cross chop here. Cross chop is going to land. Obstagoon continuing to farm up. Opponent tries to go for CMP, but I end up going for the extra. I commit the shield. Opponent is going to full send the Draco Meteor, and I'm going to get the farm down. Landorus did leave with energy here, but they don't throw it. Landorus does not throw the energy. I fire off the Night Slash, and I'm able to grab a shield. That is quite fortunate for me there, as the opponent would easily win CMP. They're going to superpower with the Landorus. In comes Ho-Oh in the back. Opponent has Palkia, and I'm going to be firing off the Brave Bird here into the Palkia. Brave Bird able to land. Ho-Oh makes it to Brave Bird number 2. The energy we farmed up earlier coming in handy, KOing the Palkia. Down goes Landorus as we clutch a very close win. Next game, we see the same leads Obstagoon into yet another Therian Landorus. Same as before, I immediately save switch into Zacian. They're going to be firing off the Stone Edge, getting some chip damage, and now they're going to send in their own Zacian. I'm farming up to the back-to-back Wild Charges here. Let's put some pressure on my opponent. Wild Charge number 1, able to land. They go for the move right away. So this is either a Wild Charge or a Close Combat. They go for the Close Combat. That tells me their secondary charge move is Play Rough, which is very useful information that I can take advantage of later in the game. I'm able to farm up to the back-to-back Wild Charges. I get the first shield. Can I get the second? If I can get shields down, which I can, I'm hoping that Ho-Oh with energy will be able to sweep in the endgame. In comes Ho-Oh, my opponent with perfect timing, able to fire off a charge move. This is going to be resisted. It is the play rough, and then I'm going to look for the farm down. Opponent with a sliver of HP makes it to one final move. They make it to the close combat, and the resisted damage definitely adds up. In the back, they have Giratina, so they are so weak to Obstagoon in the back, but I was not able to flip switch. Brave Bird connects. I'm going to send in the Obstagoon. I have to bait back out the Landorus, make themselves debuff with a superpower, and then hope that I can incinerate down with Ho-Oh and then Brave Bird for the win. I fire off the Night Slash. That's going to land. I'm not quite at Night Slash number 2, and that's a problem because guess who has back-to-back superpowers and wins CMP? It's the Landorus. They're at -1 attack here, but the superpower is still going to KO. In comes the Ho-Oh looking for the Incinerate farm down, but it's just not going to happen. Landorus makes the superpower. Down goes Ho-Oh, and that's game over. Moving into the next match, and our target has been acquired. Obstagoon into Giratina Origin. Let's go. Opponent save switches into Dialga. I'm going to farm up, get some chip damage, and then send in Ho-Oh. Honestly, I meant to send in the Zacian here. Sending in Ho-Oh is a bit of a risky situation. They're going to fire off the Iron Head bait. I'm going to return fire with a Sacred Fire here, hoping for an attack debuff. Firing off the Sacred Fire, my opponent will commit the shield, and we do not get the debuff. That is not great. I'm going to double shield. I need to try and keep switch. My opponent goes for the Thunder. I'm going to farm up, and now I'm going for the Brave Bird here. I'm hoping that I can make it to double Brave Bird. Brave Bird is going to be no shielded, as my opponent is now going to send in their own Ho-Oh. I'm going to fire off another Brave Bird here. Brave Bird is going to be shielded, so at the very least, I do have shields down. I just have to find a way to get rid of my opponent's Ho-Oh. They're going to be firing off the Sacred Fire. That deals so much damage. They thankfully do not get the debuff. I'm farming up, going for the Wild Charge. This Wild Charge is definitely going to hurt. Wild Charge lands. I farm up and switch into the Obstagoon. I bank the Night Slash. Is this enough to KO? Yes, it is. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We see a great lead in the next match, Obstagoon into Mewtwo. My opponent save switches into Dialga, and this time I do make the correct counter switch into the Dialga, and that is going to be the Zacian. I'm farming up, going for the close combat, but I lose CMP to the Dialga. I do want to preserve HP on my Zacian, so I am going to commit the shield, even though that wouldn't have KO'd, and I'm going to be launching the close combat. Close combat is going to land. Dialga trying to get to another Iron Head, but they do not get there. My opponent can send back in the Mewtwo, but I'm at the back-to-back Wild Charges here, meaning if they want to get rid of the Zacian, they're going to have to commit a shield on their Mewtwo. I'm going for Wild Charge number 2, Decision Time for my opponent. They're going to let that through. In the back, they have a Snarl Zacian, and I should have this game won, as Ho-Oh does very well versus Zacian. They're going to fire off a close combat. They're now debuffed. Let's see how much damage Obstagoon can do. I'm going for the Resisted Night Slash. Keep in mind, this is a debuffed Zacian, and it still does absolutely nothing. Obstagoon in the Master League, definitely a fun pick, and especially if you can get it aligned against like a Mewtwo or a Giratina, it can put in some work, but man, if its charge moves are not hitting for super effective, it struggles so hard. We send in the Ho-Oh, and the opponent concedes the match. Picking up a very tough lead in the next match, Obstagoon into Zekrom, and you guys are going to see what I'm talking about here. This is a matchup where Obstagoon is hitting for neutral damage, and so is the Zekrom. I'm going to be firing off the Night Slash here. Night Slash is going to land, and look at that damage. It just does absolutely no damage whatsoever. I'm going to let this through. Opponent baits with a Crunch. They do not get the debuff. I'm hoping that I can make it to 3 Night Slashes here and potentially get Switch or Shield Advantage. Night Slash is going to land. Obstagoon cannot get there. The Dragon Breaths are just too oppressive. I'm going to send in my Zacian, but they have a lot of energy here. They fire off the Wild Charge. That deals a lot of damage, and in comes Lugia. I'm going to be returning fire here, firing off the Wild Charge. This is definitely going to hurt. Wild Charge connects. I'm going to send in Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh beginning to farm. Lugia is going to fire off a move. This is just a Sky Attack, so I am able to tank it. I'm going to farm up with Ho-Oh and go for the Sacred Fire as soon as I get it. I just want to try and get rid of this Lugia as quickly as I possibly can. Sacred Fire is going to KO. Back in comes the Zekrom, but these Incinerates are not doing a lot of damage. They make it to a move. I'm forced to commit the shield. It's the Crunch. Our defense does get debuffed, and they have their own Ho-Oh in the back. I fire off the Sacred Fire. Opponent calls the bait, and I concede the match. Moving into the next match, leading Obstagoon into a Giratina. Let's go. They're going to have to immediately switch. They send in Lugia. And here, I probably should have immediately switched into my Zacian. But I was just so happy that Obstagoon could do super effective damage to multiple teammates here that I decided to stay in with the Obstagoon, go for the double Night Slash to get some chip damage, and then I am now going to send in the Zacian. This is enough for the Aeroblast. But the nice thing is, I tank an Aeroblast, and they're never going to be able to Dragon Tail down a Fairy type. So now I can overfarm quite a bit, fire off the Wild Charge, and this will KO if they let it through. Wild Charge gets no shielded. My opponent is going to send back in the Giratina, but here's the bad thing. Our switch timers are misaligned, and they're going to be able to take advantage of that. I fire off the Wild Charge, they let that through. I can fully wait my clock, but they're going to be able to switch, and I still cannot. I send in the Obstagoon. They have their own Ho-Oh in the back. I'm finally able to switch, but I'm behind by 2 Incinerates here. This is going to be tough. I decide to call the Sacred Fire. It is the Sacred Fire, and I do not get debuffed. That is very good. I'm going for a Sacred Fire of my own, hoping for the debuff here. Sacred Fire gets shielded, but there's no debuff to be seen. I do need to start shielding here in case they start going for Brave Birds. They're going for another Sacred Fire, and they do debuff my attack. That is not great. I'm farming up, firing off the Brave Bird here. This is debuffed, but it's still going to hurt. So we do see the final shield deployed. I farm up. I win the coin flip CMP over my opponent's Ho-Oh with the Brave Bird. Brave Bird able to land. There's a little bit of lag, but it is a CMP tie, so they're going to be able to fire off their move. Sacred Fire is going to KO. I send in the Obstagoon, and they switch out of the Ho-Oh into the Giratina. But Giratina's moves are triple resisted in this matchup. They may have a massive advantage in terms of CP, but Obstagoon has an incredibly good type advantage. Shadow Ball just does no damage. I'm firing off another Night Slash here. Night Slash is going to land. I need to farm up until I'm very close to the back-to-back moves here. They go for another Shadow Ball. That just does nothing. Obstagoon absolutely crushing Giratina. I'm firing off another Night Slash here. I'm now 1 off my next move. In comes the Ho-Oh, and I get to the Night Slash. Night Slash doesn't do a lot of damage here, but it does enough. And that is a good game. Terrible lead in the next match, Obstagoon into Zacian. I will need to immediately save switch out of here into my own Zacian. I'm just going to farm up a bunch of energy. Opponent is going to do the same. They bank a move and then send in Ho-Oh. But I am running Wild Charge on my Zacian, so I can fight back here. Wild Charge, massive damage onto the Ho-Oh, and I throw on good timing, going for Wild Charge number 2 here. Opponent has a lot of energy, and they want to use it, so they're going to commit the shield. They farmed up to 100 energy. I will commit the shield. They go for the Brave Bird. I'm not going to be able to farm down, so I'm going to be firing off the Wild Charge here. Wild Charge does get the KO as they save their final shield in the back. No, they have Landorus. And this is looking like it might be game over. Close combat will deal some chip damage, which is nice. I'm going to farm up. Unfortunately, not able to get to another move. I'm going to send in the Obstagoon and basically just sacrifice the Obstagoon at this point. Hope they go for a Stone Edge for some reason, but they do not. Superpower KOs. I send in Ho-Oh. Maybe if I can Incinerate down, but that would be reliant on them not having Wild Charge, which they do, and I concede the match. Hopping into the final match, leading Obstagoon into Mamoswine. At least Obstagoon can hit for super effective here. Opponent save switches into Dialga. I'm going to farm up, get some chip damage to put the Dialga into a range where 1 close combat will KO. And now I can send in Zacian. I'm going to commit the shield because I want to preserve HP on my Zacian. I know Dragon Breath not going to be doing a lot of damage. And if I can leave this matchup with a lot of HP, then the Zacian can put in work against the Mamoswine as well. They're going to let that go. They're taking their shield advantage. But bad news for the Mamo. I'm going to be able to get these shields back in a hurry. I have 2 more close combats. Close combat number 1 gets the shield, and I'm going for close combat number 2 here. Close combat is going to get the shield. Mamoswine looking to massively overfarm, but they overfarm too much, lose CMP. They lose all of their energy. In the back, they have Groudon, and that's game over. All in all, I had a lot of fun with my level 50 Obstagoon. It's definitely a Pokemon that struggles a lot in the Open Master League. Basically, if there's a situation where Obstagoon cannot hit for super effective damage, it's going to be a losing matchup. Any type neutral matchup, Obstagoon, purely just based off of its stat product, is probably going to get crushed. But Obstagoon can also be very fun, because if you can align it onto those Dialga, Mewtwo, Giratina origins, man, Obstagoon can put in some work. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is absolutely incredible. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.